In the 1960s, a Swedish researcher found that beavers would build dams in response to the sound of moving water. So today, we're going to explain why sometimes you feel like a squirrel doing a beaver's job and what you can do to create the type of workplace that you and your team find energizing.
This is the Parks and Restoration Podcast, the show that takes lessons from things like squirrels and beavers and uses them to help parks and natural resource professionals leave a legacy of healthy ecosystems, quality parks, and future generations of people who care about the natural world. I'm Jeremy Yost, part of the Natural Areas Management team here at Potawatomi County Conservation, coming to you from the Loess Hills of western Iowa, where I just got back from putting out a blind for deer hunting.
All right. We actually just put one up at work, too, for a mentoring hunts that we're going to be doing this fall.
Nice.
Right on. And I'm Chris Lee, Executive Director at Des Moines County Conservation and a leadership consultant coming to you from the east coast of Iowa, right on the Mississippi River, where beavers and squirrels are quite common. So let's talk about this beaver study a little bit. So I'd heard about this, I don't know, a long time ago, and it's been in my mind, and I talk about this in some of my programs that I do. But basically, they took captive beavers, and they wanted to understand what is their motivation for building dams. Is it such that they see the moving water and they want to change the landscape? Is it that they want to create impoundments? And so they looked at this in a couple of different ways. And one of the ways they did was they simply played the sound of moving water. And what they found was that the beavers would go and they would start damming up as close to the source of the sound as they possibly could. And so and this was granted a long time ago, but it shines some light on the motivations behind what they do. What it shows is that beavers are just naturally drawn to stopping moving water. It isn't so much that they're consciously thinking about, well, if I put a pond here and that's going to change things. It's not really engineering designs or visioning plans the way us conservation people do. They decide that this is where I'm going to do it, and they hear moving water, and so they go to stop it. And they have found since that you can actually get around their little bit of beaver geniusness. If you want to drain the waters behind there, you can put in culverts that go through the dam, and as long as they don't make the noise, as long as they're silent and the water can flow through there silently, the beavers won't go and block the mouths of the culverts. So pretty interesting stuff, but I think that lends a lot of insight into our workplaces and what it's like to manage a workplace. We're going to be talking about that throughout the course of this episode here.
Yeah, for sure. So you're saying that beavers, they have to build dams? They react and they do?
They can't not build dams. It's just, it is their thing. It is absolutely their thing, which is one of the things we're going to be talking about.
It's almost like it's this universal force of nature, this thing that just gives them so much energy, and it's like their thing in life. And, I think we're going to find a way to apply that to humans too.
Yeah. I do this talk called Squirrels Don't Build Dams. And that's the point that I make, is that oftentimes in our work or in our lives, we find ourselves in situations where we're just not suited to it. And we find that certain things that we do drain our energy. And then there's certain things that we do that absolutely give us energy, that we could do those sustainably over and over and over and keep coming back to doing those over again, even if those things, and oftentimes, especially when those things are hard or difficult. And so understanding that and tying that back to your workplace and to the way you work is a great way to, one, avoid burnout. Two, it's a great way to tie into intrinsic motivation for your team. And you can tap into this near endless source of energy that keeps your work sustainable despite it being difficult. So, Jeremy, let's talk about that. I know there's a little bit of overlap with our last episode here.
Yeah, exactly. In our last episode, we talked about this idea of energy and this flow of energy, and how taking this energy that we're able to get into the workplace and into our workplace ecosystem, and how actually subtracting things that were taking energy away gave us more energy to focus on what we really wanted to prioritize. And it was like this way of really getting this big boost of overall energy and productivity. And today we're looking at how we can actually take that a step further and boost that energy and productivity by tapping into sources of this intrinsic motivation, the things that bring you and your team joy.
Yeah, it's like making sure that the beavers on your team are tasked with going out and building the dams, and the squirrels on your team are tasked with going out and collecting the acorns and stashing those away. And if you invert that, and oftentimes you'll see this happen, not playing to somebody's strengths or whatever, what you'll find, and maybe you have found yourself in this position, is that sometimes you feel like a beaver doing a squirrel's job or vice versa. And really, you feel this call to, it's like that movie Moana, feeling called back to the water or whatever it is. And so that's really what we're digging into today. And let me be clear on something. This isn't just about necessarily being good at something. You can be good at something and still have it be the type of thing that just drains your energy. I mean, you might be really good at spreadsheets, but you just loathe accounting, right? And so it's things like that. Like you might be really good at running meetings, but meetings just sap your soul. Like in our previous discussion on the law of subtraction, some there's different types of meetings, right? And so like brainstorming sessions, we're going to talk about this here in a bit, might be the type of thing that give you energy. But the meetings where you got to sit down and plan out strategy and the to-do lists, that might be something that's completely demotivating for you. So it's not necessarily what we're talking about, what you're good at. It's what gives you energy. The insidious thing about that, though, is being good at something will almost certainly get more of that thing assigned to you. If you're really good at it and you excel in it, you're almost guaranteed to get more of that. And this goes for your team too. If you got somebody on your team that's really good at doing something, it's likely you're going to assign them more of that stuff to do. And so the key here is not necessarily just focus on what people are good at, but focusing in on what it is that gives them energy. That's the core. We talk about this in episode after episode, is looking for that energy. When Jeremy's out there maintaining prairies and cutting cedars off of prairies, he's allowing that energy to get down to those species. And the key here is to find where the two things, the energy and the work, intersect, and try to play at that intersection as much as you possibly can for yourself and for your team.
Exactly. And I've found that it really comes from a place of, you have to be introspective. You have to think about yourself and think about, at the end of the day, like, what happened today that gave me energy? And what's the thing that maybe it's a different day that you had meetings all day versus being out in the field, and thinking about how those things really played in your energy in yourself, and then also being able to recognize those things in your team as well. So for me, I've found that, like, I end up gaining energy and find real joy. Part of this too is finding that joy in motivating others around an idea or cause or belief that I truly believe in. And so this ends up playing out a lot when the interns first come in and we're really getting them excited around the idea of land stewardship, or like when we get to go over to Farm Creek for the first time, and the whole hour-long drive, I'm like geeking out about quail, just trying to get them excited about quail, because it's this thing that I truly believe in, and I'm trying to motivate them to believe in it and gain energy from it as well. And I also love having like very, very big conversations about how best to do our work. If we have an intelligent conversation, and we find like the best management practice, it makes it even easier to be truly authentic when you're motivating others around you.
Yeah. And here, real quick, we're going to talk about why that is. But it begs the question, how do we make sure people are doing the kind of work that fuels them? So you've had the luxury of taking the time to actually understand what it is that gives you energy and the type of work that gives you energy. But not a lot of people do that. You have good days and you have bad days. And oftentimes we're not looking at this through the lens of energy. We look at it through the lens of, well, I enjoyed doing that kind of work, or I didn't enjoy doing that kind of work, or I enjoy those people, or I don't. But really, we got to take a step back and look at this through the lens of energy. So we're going to look at this through actually two different lenses. And the first one is the working genius framework, which Jeremy and I both love geeking out about. But this framework was popularized by Patrick Lencioni. He is, to me, one of the greatest organizational management gurus of our time. He's written a whole bunch of books, but he's written a whole book it's called The 6 Types of Working Genius. And we're going to go through each one of those. And, we are not working genius experts, but we certainly are nerds about it. And I've got working genius assessments hanging on my walls. I think once you understand it, what this does is it gives us language around this energy thing. For the longest time at work, I had this sense that there's energy that can be traced, and it can be manipulated a little bit. And I could never find language. And then I stumbled across this book and I'm like, oh my God, that is it. That's the language around workplace energy. This is what this is all about. And so we're going to geek out about that for a bit. And then the other lens that we're going to look through this at is through the lens of people's things. And I put those in quotes. And I don't know, I really got to come up with a better name for this, but everybody has their thing. It's the way a beaver is naturally drawn to building dams. There's just no getting around it. they're going to do that. Or the way a squirrel is drawn to stashing acorns, or the way Jeremy is drawn to having those big philosophical conversations. People have their things that they're naturally drawn to, and connecting that through work will keep you and your team motivated, engaged, and productive. So that's the two lenses we're going to look at this: working genius and your thing. I really got to come up with a better name for that. So Jeremy, let's jump into working genius. I'll let you kick this one off.
Yeah, I really like what you said there, that we like to nerd out about the six types of working genius. And um, I think it's almost like to an annoying point that like I kind of filter a lot of things in my entire life through this lens, because it just exactly like you said, it gives language to what you're already feeling. And if you're noticing these changes in energy, or these changes in like, you really like tasks, or you really like these big ideas, you can filter through and really start to understand people when you look at them through this lens. So let's get into it. The six types of working genius, they actually end up spelling out the word widget, WIDGET. And so the first one is W. It stands for wonder. And these people with this working genius are constantly trying to spot the thing that others might miss. How or what can we do to make this better or even more successful? They're always trying to see, like, look at the details. What are the details that we're going to miss that's going to bite us in the butt later?
Yeah, and each one of these letters that spells out widget. So there's six of them. They're called geniuses. Your working genius, but it isn't so much that you're smart. I think it could have easily been called your working energizers or something like that. But that was kind of a terrible name. So working genius does work on this, but it's not so much that that's your area of intelligence or your area of expertise. It's your area that gives you energy. And so Jeremy just talked on the W. I stands for invention. So people with this genius are really good at, or they get a lot of energy from coming up with ideas to solve or act on that thing that the wonder genius may have spotted as something that we can improve. So it's the people with the wonder genius are always asking the big questions, why, the big whys, and the philosophical stuff. The people with I as one of their working geniuses, they're always just coming up with ideas and new ways of addressing that big philosophical thing, or addressing that question of why are we doing this, or is there another better way of doing this? And it's like, well, here, I got an idea. Well, I got this idea. What about this idea? And so they get a lot of energy from just coming up with ideas and inventing.
Exactly. And this whole thing ends up being, if you have a person with each of these working geniuses, you can start to see how this starts to flow and connect together. And so we have these people that are constantly asking why. We have these people that are constantly coming up with ideas. And D is for discernment. These people have this like innate ability to take those ideas and play them out in their head almost in real time and spot any of the flaws or risk associated with those ideas. And this person really ends up being that filter for your idea person. And so you can go to your discernment people, filter these ideas, and then you're starting to actually put together a work plan or a task list.
Yeah. So like people with D, if you were to hand them a list and say, okay, here's all the ideas I came up with for addressing this situation, they would get jazzed about, heck yeah, let me look through these and pick out the top three that are going to be best. Whereas people with the, I guess we should have explained how these work on as far as geniuses and frustrations, but you could have these in your frustrations as well. So somebody who does not have that as a genius, you might hand them that list and be like, oh my God, you want me to do what? And so, it gets back to that squirrel and beaver thing. So that's WID. G is for galvanizing. So once the idea has been vetted, so you got this big question, you got some ideas to address it. The discerners have gone through and they've gone through the ideas and say, okay, this one are going to probably be the best to address this. Then the galvanizers step in. These are the ones that get energy from rallying the troops around an idea and getting them all excited and committed to the project and come on team, let's go knock this out. Let's get this done. And really motivating them around that idea and whatever it is that you're going to be doing. So yeah, no one has all six of these, and that's perfectly fine. So we'll explain how these work out when we get to the end here, as far as the two in your genius and two in your competencies and your two in your frustration. So nobody's going to have all six. In fact, you're likely, or in fact, you're almost guaranteed the whole way the whole framework is set up, you're going to have two geniuses and they're going to kind of complement each other. The idea here is that this is why teams exist. And so the key is to maximize the time spent in your genius, minimize time in your frustration. So that's W, I, D, and G. Jeremy, let's go get to E and T here.
E is the enablement. So once the project is actually in moment, these are the people that are good at spotting like the potential bottlenecks and mitigating them and like keeping that team momentum. Like they're like literally the glue that holds all of the pieces together once we've actually like put this plan into motion.
Yeah, these people will be the ones that get energy from walking up to somebody and saying, "Hey, I see this project is behind. How can I help?" And then having somebody say, "Man, I appreciate that. Here's where I need some help." These are the enablers. They're the ones that want to help out and keep that project moving. And then the last one is T, which is for tenacity. So these are the people that just like to get shit done. All right. These are the ones that want to see the task list checked off. They want to see things cross the finish line. They love getting something done, turning back and being like, hell yeah, that's finished. We did that. So that's 6. So if you notice, this follows the way work has to happen. So you've got this big idea. There's some big question to ask about how are we going to solve this thing? Here's this big problem, this big existential problem. How are we going to solve this thing? All right, let's come up with some ideas to solve it. And then let's discern these ideas and figure out which of these is likely to work. And then let's rally some people around the idea. Let's get people together to help each other out to get the idea done. And then let's get some people to actually see this thing all the way across the finish line. Each person is going to have 2 working geniuses. So 2 of these WIDGET, are going to be in their working genius. So those are the 2 things that are going to give them energy. And Jeremy and I will talk about how this works out for the both of us here in a second. Then you're going to have 2 in your competencies. And in your competencies, these are kind of just meh. Like you can do these, but if you spend too much time working in just your competency geniuses, you're going to burn out given enough time. And then you'll have 2 in your frustrations. And I don't know why these work in pairs, but that kind of seems to be a function of the natural world too, is that things happen to work in pairs. And if you work in your frustrations long enough, and it will not take very long at all, you will burn out very quickly. Just the thought of working in some of these just drains you. And we'll talk about how that works out here in a second. So look at yourself and your team through this framework to understand where that energy comes from and how you can cultivate that within your teams. Hey, real quick, if this conversation about energy is hitting home, if you think that mapping this out would be beneficial to you and your team, we've created a free tool that will help you do just that. It's called the Personal and Team Energy Audit, and it helps you figure out what parts of your work give you energy and which ones drain it. Plus, how to find your element, that thing we couldn't find a name for, that makes you come alive. You can grab it free in the show notes. The link will be right there. So just go down to the show notes, click the link, and we can send it to you in PDF, Word, or Google Doc format. It's the Personal and Team Energy Audit, and we think you'll love it. So, Jeremy, talk about what your genius is and then what your frustrations are and how that plays out for you.
Yeah, I would like to note here that there's actually a really cool assessment that you can do. It does cost a few dollars, but if you go to theworkinggenius.com, you can do this assessment. And funny enough, Chris actually gifted me my assessment. And so working through that, I found that I'm a WG. So I'm a wonderer and a galvanizer. And so I really really enjoy bringing people together around this like big idea. So I know we've talked about it a lot on this podcast, but it's a common theme that we can keep going back to, that the Save the Prairie Day that we did. I really enjoy thinking through all the details of that day and then galvanizing people and bringing them together to get something done, like clearing cedars off of a hillside. Bringing those people together and getting them rallied together. And just, I really enjoy that. And then I also really enjoy, and it's probably a reason that I like Start With Why by Simon Sinek so much. And in the mornings I end up, either listening to books or watching YouTube about this kind of stuff, is that I really enjoy having those big why conversations. And then like looking for those little things that in our program that can make us even more successful. I'm the type of person that I'm just always trying to be as successful as we can be through work. And I just really enjoy thinking about these big ideas and then rallying people around them. And then, and actually part of this too is that my frustrations, and so this other part of work that we still have to do, are E and T. And so having T as a frustration, the best example I have of that plays out at something at home, actually. and doing laundry. And so I'm like, all right, we have this nice washing machine. I have to wash my laundry. I got my laundry washed. It's dried. I take it out of the dryer. It sits in the hamper. I'm like, all right, I achieved the part of the task that was really, really important. I got my clothes washed. But then to like drive that over the finish line and actually fold the laundry and put it away, I always have to kind of almost force myself to put myself into that situation.
Yeah. And so be thinking about how this plays out at your work. So T is tenacity. So, seeing all that through, like, okay, we got the basic stuff done. The laundry's done. But there's always those little few things in any project, whether it's doing laundry at home or seeing a project through to work, seeing it all the way through to the end and dotting the I's and crossing the T's. If someone has tenacity in their frustration, they oftentimes will be demotivated by having to do that final checklist stuff to see things completely finished. So I'm an IW, so my geniuses are invention and wonder. And so I also love thinking about big picture. And more than anything else, though, I love playing in ideas. So I love thinking about the big philosophical stuff, like the why behind what it is that we're doing and the purpose behind our organizations. This is why I love working in conservation and in parks, because it isn't just there to make money or to turn a profit. We do this for a bigger purpose. We show up to work every day for a bigger purpose. And that jives perfectly with my genius of wonder. But more than anything, I love ideas. Since I've discovered Working Genius, I have found just how much I live in the world of ideas. Every day for me is just, I am energized by coming up with ideas. I am energized by being exposed to new ideas. This is why I'm a voracious reader. This is why I love speaking and writing and even podcasting, because it gives me an opportunity to share ideas. I can go out and I can read these leadership books, and I can read things like, Simon Sinek's Start With Why and all these, business management books and stuff like that, and then figure out how to translate that to the world of parks and conservation, which is the world that I love so much. And so it gives me that opportunity to share ideas. But on the other end of that spectrum, I have E and G, which is enablement and galvanizing, in my frustrations. So as much as I love coming up with, learning about, and sharing ideas and asking the big questions, I don't so much love galvanizing people around them. I do not like asking people to do something. I do not like having to step in and help somebody get something done. I would be a terrible softball coach or soccer coach. Like that's just not my thing. Whereas Jeremy having galvanizing in his genius would be great at that. I think when it comes, when you have kids and the laundry needs done, you're going to do great at motivating them to go get that damn laundry done.
Right.
I, on the other hand, am not so much. I just want to be like, you know what? I'm going to come up with the best checklist you've ever seen. I'm going to put it on the wall. I'm going to come with all the ideas of all the different things you can do. And then, just go do them, and don't ask me to help you, because then that's going to be draining for me. So the key here is just understand these things about yourself and about those, about your team and how that all plays out.
Exactly. And I think it's the perfect time that you brought up, like a soccer team or a football team, and thinking about this framework. Really, you need all six pieces in order to get the job done, essentially. And so a thing that you can do with your team is actually sit down and do this, what they call a team assessment. And so we're going to have each of your team members do the assessment, find their working geniuses, competencies, and their frustrations, and then we're going to map that out. And so I actually recently did this with our natural areas management team. Now that we're down to 2 full-time people, we wanted to look at it and talk about how we can best work together and actually map out our team. And so we compared our working geniuses and our frustrations. And the biggest takeaway from this was that we both have E in our frustration. So we both have enablement in our frustration. And, after thinking about this and thinking about this language, it actually helped us kind of mitigate or come up with a plan for something that we each had kind of a frustration with from this last summer. And so this ends up happening in the time where, like, I'm a galvanizer. So when the interns first show up, I'm going to be right there rallying them around this idea. We're going to put this project into motion. And then once, inevitably, as you have to lift those people up, you keep the teammates together, you be that glue, that's enablement. and that's our frustration. And so a lot of times we have to recognize now that we're actually, it gets back to this, if you're good at it, or if it's a frustration, that we actually realize that we're both actually pretty good at like lifting those people up, teaching them and getting them through. But then we had to have this self realization that if we're there too long, we end up burning out and not doing as well as we could. And so now, knowing that we are each E, we're going to share the load of the enablement. We're going to actually be able to, hey, you're going to go with the intern team this day. I'm going to go with them the next day, and it allows us to have some space to work within our working genius to get out of our frustration for a while.
And that is a perfect example of how this plays out. Because prior to having language around this, you could have looked at that situation and been like, okay, I love this kind of work. I am here for the bigger purpose, and I understand all of that. Why am I feeling so burned out here in the first few weeks when the interns get here? Because I love rallying people around big ideas, and we're constantly doing big ideas stuff around here. But man, why am I so burned out? And maybe you would chalk it up to, well, I'm a bit of an introvert, so I'm just around people too much. I need to go off by myself. What it is, it's your working genius is playing out. And if enablement is in your frustrations, by spending that time with those menial tasks of like the training and the onboarding that has to be done, that's gonna drain your energy. And it isn't so much that it's work that you're not good at, or even work that you don't necessarily like. It's that it's de-energizing for you. And so by recognizing that, to minimize the amount of time that you spend in that.
Exactly, and that's exactly how it ended up playing out, is that if we just look at those, like, personality assessments that we do, like, knowing that's exactly what I thought was that, "Oh, just being an introvert, I'm getting too much, like, people time or whatever," but I actually really enjoyed teaching people, and so without this language, I'm like, "Man, I enjoy teaching people, but I'm an introvert, maybe it's just that I'm getting too much people time," but using this language and realizing that I'm putting myself into that enablement frustration, what's taking energy away. Or another way to think of it, it ended up burning the candle at both ends. I needed to take away a little bit, get into my working genius, and build that candle back up so that I was there for my people when I could go back into that enablement.
Yeah, exactly. And it's being aware of that, and this working genius thing really gives you language around that. And so here at Des Moines County Conservation, it has worked out in a number of different ways. It's just recognizing um, what people do and don't like, and what they are not so much what they do and don't like. It's what they don't get energy from. And so we had a person. She was in a naturalist role. She had started as a grant based position, I think as a AmeriCorps type thing. Did a really great job teaching. And we had a naturalist position open up. We promoted her into the naturalist role, and she figured out later on that she just did not like teaching. And that come back to her working genius is, working in that was de-energizing for her, but she loved this line of work. And so it turned out we were able to move her into the field role. We had positions open up. And so we moved her into that. She's really excelling there. And we've got a guy on staff who is really great at doing mechanic work. And so we put him on that. And so those are kind of tying into strengths. But if you tie us back to working genius, one of the decisions that we made, and I think I talked about this in the last episode, was to stop having all the staff be part of the quarterly goal setting, because most of them were not wired for wonder or invention. And goal setting really comes down to playing in those two geniuses of wonder and invention, asking the big questions. All right, what are the big issues that we're up against, and what do we need to do to address these big issues? And most of the team at my organization, that was in their frustrations. They hated brainstorming meetings, and so they would just completely check out during these meetings, and they just weren't going great. And so
Yeah,
I
and
scrapped them.
yeah, exactly. And this actually reminds me of like this time before realizing this like working genius idea, that back when I was with you and when I first started, we went on this, what we ended up calling our vision quest.
Right, yeah.
We were trying to dream big and set these goals and expectations for work over the next like 5 or 10 years. And like I just absolutely ate that up and loved it, and I was like, "I don't understand why everyone else is, like, just feels bored by this and just wants to get back to work, like, this is awesome,
Yeah.
why are we not all dreaming big and thinking about these big ideas?" But now this is perfect. We have language, we have this idea around that people are just different, and we have to put them into their geniuses and keep them out of their frustration.
Yeah, and the fact that some people are de-energized by having brainstorming meetings or thinking big picture doesn't make them bad employees. It just means that that's not their energy. It's asking
Exactly.
a beaver to go and stash acorns. And so by moving those people around, so now I understand where everybody's geniuses are and where their frustrations are, and I try to keep them as much as I can in their working genius and outside of their frustrations. Now, you can't do this all the time, but we moved from regularly monthly staff meetings to just doing quarterly trips because most of the team here has enablement or tenacity as part of their geniuses. And so they want to work together and they want to get shit done. And
Exactly.
we have all staff work days sometimes, and we try to build our work around working together. In fact, just this week, a bunch of them got together and they went and built a deer blind on this one spot where we're going to be doing mentored hunts. And I'm likely to find out at the end of the year when we do our end of year review that was probably going to be one of their favorite projects. So yeah, it's recognizing where the energy comes from and then tying your people to that as best you can.
Exactly, and it relates again back to the last episode of this, like, this idea of subtraction, like, exactly what you were just talking about. You subtracted those monthly meetings, and then you were actually able to refocus that energy into these staff work days. And so you're using your people's working genius, subtracting things that are putting them in their frustration, and then using that time to put them into their working geniuses. And I think another thing that's going to be super helpful for us in the future too with this is that now that we've done this team map and understanding the places that we're lacking in these six working geniuses, when we actually get to the point that we're actually able to add to our team, I'm going to be like almost hyper focused on trying to find the person that's going to be able to fill our gaps, because I know that if we're able to fill those gaps and have people that take away our frustration and have those tasks that are in those working geniuses, that's going to make us a better team. That's going to make us an even higher functioning team.
Exactly. Yes. And that's the real value in this is recognizing where the frustrations are, where people get their energy from, and then filling in those gaps. Man, that's super powerful. So taking this, we say we're going to look at this through two lenses. So that's working genius. If you have the opportunity, I strongly encourage you to read the book, The Six Types of Working Genius. There's a Working Genius podcast. You can listen to that. Patrick Lencioni, it's spelled Lencioni is what it looks like, but it's pronounced Lencioni. But Patrick Lencioni, if I ever get a chance to meet that guy, I want to give him a hug for just giving us language around this stuff, because this is just absolutely, it is incredibly powerful. Once you understand this, it unlocks just incredible ways of building productivity into your team. But this other lens is that everybody has their thing. And what I mean by this is that like everybody has there's things in their lives that just light them up. It might be an activity, it might be a place, it might be a certain kind of work or something that they do or whatever. And so if working genius is work fuel, this thing that people have is nuclear reactor level energy. And so I'll share an example of how this has played out once in my working career. So quite some time ago, I had a field technician who as I figured out later on, his thing was research. Every day he was coming up with new studies that he wanted to do, and he'd be out in the field and was just constantly weaving research into the stuff that he was doing, sometimes to the detriment of the work that needed done. And as much as I absolutely value research, we're not a research organization, and so it wasn't perfectly compatible. But once he left and went into a research role, absolutely excelled. And now I think he's I don't know, the head of something with the state. I don't even remember what it was, but he's done a bunch of raptor research. He was catching and banding hawks and all this stuff, and like just doing super cool shit and loving every minute of it, at least near as I can tell. And so again, it's figuring out what your thing is. I had a naturalist one time, and the way I figured this out was we had this event for some of our volunteers, and it was like this luncheon event to thank our volunteers for this big Halloween thing that we do in our campground. And from across the room, I could see she was having a conversation with one of my board members at the time, and she was just animated, like her hands were up in the air, and she's like, talking with her arms and stuff, and I'm like, okay, whatever it is she's talking about, she's jazzed about that, and so like I make my way over there, kind of slowly, nonchalantly, and I get within earshot, and she's talking about this place. She's from northern Minnesota, and she was talking about the Northwoods and this piece of property that she helps this foundation manage and all this stuff. And she was just absolutely jacked about it. And I'm like, your heart is in Northwoods. Like your thing is up there. Like, you're doing great work here, but I really think that you need to consider finding a way to get back to where your heart is. And eventually she did. And she's loving it. Down here, we have this electrician. He's an electrician by trade, but he is just absolutely jacked about native landscaping. So much so that he started his own landscaping company. It's Samuel Hollingsworth. I interviewed him. I don't know. I'll figure out what episode it is. I'll put it in the show notes. And so he now on the side, he turned his entire yard into native landscaping, and now he helps people all around town establish native landscaping in their yards, just tapping into his thing.
Exactly. And I especially like that the story of the naturalist whose heart was in the Northwoods. I think that's just a great example of like putting this idea into action as a leader is you actually had to recognize and go over there and figure out, why is she so animated? And then this other part that's kind of outside of this that's just commendable is this idea that, once you find someone's thing, actually encouraging them to run for it, to actually be like, you know what, you're doing great work here, but I can tell that you're going to do even better over there. I mean, that's an A plus in leadership right there.
Yeah, and it sucks because oftentimes it sends people out the door. But if it puts them in a better place in life, then that more than anything is my job. The way I see it, that's my job, not so much as the leader of the organization, but just as a leader of people, of connecting them to that thing that they love so much, and just making sure that they put themselves in a position in life for them to be as happy and successful and to thrive as best they possibly can.
Exactly. And I have a good example of this that happened recently that's just right up this exact same aisle that we recently one of our interns actually ended up extending their stay with us as they were trying to figure out what's next in life and they started applying to just different jobs and ended up applying for this one recently that was in stewardship doing a thing that's very similar to what we're doing now. And they ended up having this awakening moment and turning down the position. They were offered this 1 year position and had this like realization that like their heart is really focused on research and grad school. And I just think that that's absolutely amazing for them to have that realization that, you know what, their term is going to end here at the end of October. And they turned down this job in the beginning of October. And they're like, even though I see the light at the end of the tunnel of this employment, I'm going to actually take the step to turn down this position because I know that my heart's not in it. I mean, that is absolutely amazing.
Yeah. And what sacrifices are they making to do that? Like you found something, okay, well, I kind of enjoy the stewardship stuff and they just offered me to stay on for another year and make money and do some work that I know, that it's fine. But instead, I'm going to go back to grad school and do research and be broke and continue to live the college life well beyond the college kid age because this is where my heart is. And you hear that old cliche of like follow your passions. And this is in that vein, but it is not that. It's something very different. It's really understanding yourself and understanding where that energy comes from and pursuing that. And so I guess I would change it, don't pursue your passion, pursue what gives you energy.
Exactly. And a thing that this plays out for in me is that I absolutely really, really enjoy working for 10-hour days. There are things that I know that I'm missing. Like I would actually really enjoy having the time to be able to volunteer with a PF chapter. Like I really miss that part of my life that I had when I was working with you. But it does give me this opportunity to take that 3-day weekend and go towards other passions like hunting. Like hunting and fishing are where I build that candle back up, where I fill my cup. Just being out in nature with my dogs, crappie fishing, whatever, it's that thing that I need to be there on Monday morning and be the best that I can be.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue into uh, cultivating the workplace such that it plays into people's things. Because when work gets in the way of someone's thing, disengagement is going to result, guaranteed. And as we've shared in previous episodes, the polling organization Gallup has found that something to the tune of 70% or 80% of the world's workforce is disengaged, and it costs the world billions of dollars in lost productivity. And we can all relate to this. Like we've had those times where we're we're demotivated, where our energy is low, the work we're doing is dragging us down, and you kind of check out. But then somewhere along the way, you get out on the weekend and spend the time behind the bird dog, or get that time in the tree stand. Or I have one guy that works here, his thing is racing. He races sprint cars. And so, we build that around his racing schedule. And so this is the thing for leaders, is not forcing the beavers on your team to go out and collect and cache acorns. It's not so much like making them do the things they don't like. We all have to do that at some point. Like, nobody likes scrubbing out houses, but that's going to have to get done in parks. But it's recognizing people's things. If you have somebody whose things just absolutely just deer hunting, and I've got one of those for sure, it's allowing them to build a schedule so that they can get the time in the tree stand during the rut. Or, if somebody drives a sprint car, you make sure that they can get off early on a Friday so that they can get to the race on Friday night, or whatever that is. And it's doing, within reason, of course, but having that flexibility and cultivating that energy within your people and yourself at work.
Exactly. I think that flexibility is a good word because I have, like, for me personally, I have one thing where I basically just have a floating holiday that the first day that there's snow during pheasant season, I'm most likely going to be pheasant hunting. I mean, unless it's a burn day or there's something very important at work, you as a leader do have the ability to say no, but it gives me so much energy if I'm out there on that first snow day.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing is, and that's where this leadership stuff really comes in. Is, you can be rigid and be like, well, yeah, I mean, we got to have 72 hours notice. No, the snow day's coming. Jeremy's going to be behind the bird dog chasing roosters. Like, just get used to it. We're gonna build that around that. And then, if someone else on the team, if their thing is, something to do in the summer, then Jeremy's going to be there to fill in for them. And it's just, it's goes all ways. Is that, if they're willing to flex with you on that, you're willing to step up in order to help someone else out. So that's it's a give and take. So you might ask, how do you find the energy? Like, it's real, it's big ideas to talk about. Well, we got this working genius thing, and you can do this assessment, and another personality assessment. But even short of that, finding the energy is simply put, you look for it. Like Jeremy said earlier, you got to be introspective enough to see these things and notice them. It's just like out in the forest. You've got to look for the little oak trees coming up after a burn or after a harvest. In fact, I was just out with our natural resource guy here a couple of weeks back, and if you didn't look for those little itty bitty baby oak trees coming up through there, you wouldn't notice them, or the native plants coming up after a prairie after you clear off the cedars. It's really easy to overlook this stuff if you're not intentional about finding it. So the key is to get intentional about looking for the energy in yourself and in your team.
And so if you're looking for these things, maybe if you don't have that opportunity that Chris brought up earlier, that he was able to weasel his way over into that conversation and see what was really getting someone really jacked up in that conversation. Maybe it's as simple as like just keeping a daily or a weekly log and then noting when you are jazzed up or when you're drained. Or even at the end of the day, just sit there and be like, you know what? The things that I did today, do I have energy walking out the door or do I just feel drained walking out the door? And as you jot those things down over time, watch for trends. It really is about being self-aware, keeping in mind these things and just what are you good at? It's not just what are you good at. It's what fills your cup, gives you energy and joy. I can be, good at running a skid loader, but if it's a task that I don't fully believe in or I see a better way that it could be done, it's not going to give me joy. I can be good at it, but if the thing that I'm doing is a frustration, it may not be giving me joy, may not be giving me energy.
Yeah. And that looking for trends thing is absolutely critical. So, how do we know that the pheasant season this year is likely to be better here in Iowa is because we have this trend data going back so far. We do the August roadside count, or we don't, the DNR does, and we can see trends over time. And the same thing applies here. And so it's simply asking some questions. So like here at Des Moines County Conservation, I ask questions of my team on a pretty regular basis. We do it usually around the performance review time, which or during my regular check-ins, which I try to do fairly regular. But I ask questions like, what was your favorite thing from this last week or month or quarter or year, whatever the timeline is that we're looking back on? What did you like the least? And then notice what topics are always coming up during conversations. So like the naturalist I had before, like if we're having a conversation, almost inevitably she was going to bring up something about the North Woods. And, and somebody that's big into research, I guarantee that intern that you had that was big into research, like was probably bringing up, oh man, did you see the new research that came out from so-and-so, and so like when these things come up, you need to grab onto that and note that over time, because anybody can get excited about the latest Taylor Swift album for a while. But if your conversations with someone are always turning back to music, you can probably venture to guess that music is their thing. And so ask them to do the music for your marketing videos. It's tying back to that thing at work. And so asking these questions during check-ins with my team, one of the ways I figured out, I had most of my team figured out before I had them all do the working genius thing. But I had one guy I would ask, what's your favorite thing from this last year? And his answer always was something about getting a project done. He's like, well, we did this project and I really enjoyed seeing that thing get done. And so I documented everybody's answers. So we did this we do a annual staff meeting at the end of every year. And I document all these answers, and it's fun to go back and look at them because they're almost identical year after year after year. You can really see what people's working geniuses are because this is what gives them energy and that's what they're going to like the most. And so for him, he was a T. He loved seeing things get done and getting across the finish line. And then a lot of the other guys here, or the staff here, would say, well, I liked this group project that we did, or that trip that we took to such and such a place. It wasn't so much that we took the trip or went and saw the thing. It was that we did it together, because their working genius is E and they like working things together. And so, yeah, it's asking those questions and just trying to understand that for folks.
Yeah. And I'll just add one more thing here that, once you do understand these things, then it can really make everyone end up working together better. One little thing here is that if you have people that are on either end of this spectrum, if you have W and I's with a T, you may have this long list of ideas. That's going to the T is going to end up feeling a lot of pressure from having all of those tasks on the task list and nothing ever feeling done. And so you start to, if you really get into this and nerd out quite as much as Chris and I have, you can really start to understand how you can end up actually working better as a team together.
Yeah, I just got an insight from this. So we use this task management program here called Asana. And I love it. Every time I come up with some other idea of this thing that needs done, I just throw it in there because it gets it out of my head and I can capture it. So many of my team hates it because to them, it just looks like this long, giant, unfinished list.
Exactly.
And so like for the longest time, I'm like, this is so easy for just like, we can decide what's most important to be working on that. Again, asking those big questions, like what's most important. And to them, it's just like this endless, unfinished list. And it's a product of our working geniuses.
Yeah, it's exact same for me too. That like, I'm seeing all of these things and seeing how when each of these get done, they fit into this larger picture. And then like trying to fit all the puzzle pieces into the larger picture is what's going to give me joy. But when each of those tasks is a thing that's, it's never completely done until the puzzle is all completely done. If you break it down and like celebrate each time that you put the puzzle piece into the puzzle, that's going to really help a T. But yeah. That was a little extra there at the end for everyone, but I think that's probably it for today. So just remember that take this idea and make sure that you're not making squirrels build a dam and you're not making beavers stash acorns for the winter. And again, thanks for listening. And if you've gotten one of those light bulb moments when you hear something that you just know that you have to try, that's energy. And that's meant to be shared. You can do that in 3 ways for us. First, you can subscribe to the show so that energy keeps flowing into your podcast feed every week.
And second, you can leave a rating. That'll help the algorithms know that others like you might like this show too.
And finally, you can follow us on Instagram and as of the last episode, you can even see us on YouTube also.
Yeah. That's definitely in my working frustration is getting things put on YouTube and figuring out how all that works. So bear with us as we figure that out. But hey, if it helps get those ideas out there to other parks and conservation professionals out there, I'm willing to make that sacrifice. Better leaders, better parks. This has been the Parks and Restoration Podcast, where every other Tuesday we share strategies to help you, the parks and natural resource professional, develop into the leader that your organization, your community, and future generations need you to be. Thanks for all you do out there, and we'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.